Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Curiository live stream. I really appreciate all. Oh, hang on, let me stop the music. I really appreciate all of you, all 6 of you watching here in the chat today, as we hold an open discussion on cryptocurrencies and gun control. If you're new to Curiository on this channel, we ask questions and tell stories to try to learn more about the world, about each other, and about ourselves. The videos are stories from my own experience, but what I really want this channel to become is a community of people where we learn from each other. And the videos can just be discussion topics for us to communicate our own opinions or thoughts on. So over the next hour or so, I want to learn a lot about what you think about cryptocurrencies and gun control. And then afterwards, we're going to move to the patrons only half of this live stream. And we're going to talk about new videos over there, ideas for the channel, and some growth strategy that I've been learning about and working on. So be sure after this stream ends, if you want to join in on the patrons only live stream, go to patreon.com/curiository. There's also a link there in the description. Only patrons will be able to join in. But if you want to become a patron, you can do so for as little as $1 video, and you get other fun perks. All right. So to open up this discussion, I want to first pose a question to all of you. What are your thoughts on cryptocurrencies? I know, Faith, you've put in some questions to me, very good questions that I don't know if I 100% know the answer to them, but I really want to know where your head is at after watching the video, or based on other information that you know from doing your own research or talking with other people. I would really like to know what your opinions are on it as a technology, it as a currency, if you visualize it like that. I'd really like to know. You can do that. If some people don't know, there is a chat window next to this live stream, the video you're watching right now, or if you're on mobile, if you put your phone in portrait mode, there should be a little thing that you can tap to enable the live chat. Okay, so while you all 5 of you are putting your opinions in the chat, it's okay. It's an intimate gathering. Yeah, it's all right. So I'll just express a little bit of my opinion. I expressed some in the video, but there's some stuff I wasn't able to put in just because of flow and also timing. This was a very long video. It was almost 8 minutes, which is not what I strive for, but I needed to pack a lot in. And so just a little bit about my opinion. I think cryptocurrencies are very interesting. I think that the ideas behind them, which is a majority of what I put into the video, where computer scientists felt that they could disrupt centralized currencies by using this idea of the public ledger and encrypted transactions. But for me, it is currently a little too volatile for me to put my own money and trust into. And that's for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is people are continuing to see cryptocurrencies not as a currency. This might change. This definitely will change. But for right now, people see cryptocurrencies as an investment, if you will. Like, they use it as a way to attempt to not game the system. So right now, there are very few people using cryptocurrencies. And because of that, big players, people with a lot of money, can come in and shift the value very quickly. And that's what is happening, why you see all these jumps and why people are always talking about how Bitcoin is worth $1,000 billion and now it's worth 10 and like all that stuff. It's because these people with a lot of money, and sometimes there are websites you can go to where you can join in on these pools of people that will quickly invest a lot of money in and then quickly divest it. Is that what you say? To try to capitalize on the value change. So that's not great and doesn't really bode well for being able to trust your money into that system, because if you can't believe that everyone will value it the same way that you valued it when you first bought into it, it's not fair. Let's put it that way. And also, the second point that I would make is it's not very efficient. And what I mean by that is that whole process of all of the volunteers attempting to figure out which block to add to the public ledger, that takes around, on average, I think it's 6 hours, because the math problem they have to solve is not like what I put in the video where it's like 2 times 2 plus whatever. It is an extremely hard brute force, like, decryption problem that, oh gosh, that's just completely kind of random. And so you have to decrypt a value and then present whatever value you got to someone. It's basically a guess and check algorithm. And it takes a really, really long time. And because of that, a block of transactions could be not processed for over 6 hours, which is not great in our world of one-click Amazon purchase society. And the drone comes and delivers it to you. So that's not very efficient. And it's also not very efficient because it takes a lot of energy. Cryptocurrencies, I think, so a lot of people, there's debate on whether or not this is a good way to think about it, but Visa, the electronic transaction credit card company, they do, like, I'm going to make up some numbers just for, don't take these as fact, but they do like 100,000 transactions with like 1 kilowatt hours of electricity. Whereas Bitcoin, let's say they do like 10,000 transactions. Did I say 100,000 transactions? 100,000 transactions, 1 kilowatt hours, to like 10,000 transactions to 100 kilowatt hours. So it takes a lot more energy for Bitcoin to remain a transaction system than it does for our current system with centralized currencies and real people doing all the work to keep it all decentralized and working. So those are my opinions. That's why I don't use cryptocurrencies or think that they are the new thing that's gonna change the world. I think it might become that. I would like to think it might become that, because that means that we can move towards a more global economy. We're already in a global economy, but like a global economy where everyone shares. No one benefit. So the idea of Venezuela, like, our currency is now so much higher in value than theirs, so I could go travel to Venezuela and be completely rich. That's not very fair, because it's really not that different of a society or an economy. And so if we move to a global currency, then everyone shares the same value, the same system. Okie dokie. So on that note, let's look a little bit in the chat. There's from the government. My first inclination could be the great equalizer for economic equality. However, Faith, you're right. And like I love this. The more I think about it, the more it seems inherently unfair because it requires access to computers. Yes. Ooh, that is a great point. So hang on. I'm going to try to enable us to look at the chat so you can see who I'm looking at, see what I'm looking at. So if I go over to sorry, I'm supposed to be good at this. Okay. Blah, 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 and fade in. Cool. So now you can see the chat window that I see. And so Faith just gave a great point that I didn't even think about. So if cryptocurrencies are supposed to be a global equalizer, that requires everyone to have access to computers. And for a majority, I think it's still a majority of the world, or at least a majority of the people on the planet, they don't have access to the internet. And you can't have a global equalizer if not everybody on the globe has access to the same resources and the same ability to use the currency. That's an awesome point. So a question I would pose to you, Faith, is that important to you? So do you think it's, I mean, not the idea of a great equalizer. I think we can all basically agree that we would like all things to be equal. But do you think that really is the way we do it, right? Where a bunch of people across the world using the same computer system can make a decentralized system that actually works, because that ties into actually one of the questions you brought up, which Jesus, Drew, you're amazing. Hi, Arthur. How's it going? Sorry, I'll try not to do that. I was watching a couple of tutorials on how to do live streams better after the last one, and they said don't get distracted by the chat, so I'll try not to do that. But Faith, what I was talking about is your last point on, or your question, I guess, on what are the loopholes of cryptocurrencies. one of the things that is an interesting point for me is who actually chooses to be a volunteer and how many volunteers there actually are. Those volunteers are miners, right? And so right now, a majority of the mining is occurring in Iceland because they have very little laws on like that type of stuff. Energy is pretty cheap because of not the volcanoes, but you know what I mean, the thermal energy. And so they can have huge warehouses, and I invite you to do a Google image search for them because they look really interesting, because they're just a bunch of computer parts like stacked up next to each other to make like this mega supercomputer to do things really fast. And so those people are doing a majority of the mining, and if that happens where so many people in such a small location are doing so much of the power to keep it decentralized, it's not really decentralized, right? I know that's a weird thing to think about, but it now is in sort of a central location, and those people have a majority of the control over how Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies operate. So it kind of defeats the purpose. And so that's really interesting for me from like a corruption standpoint, because you're right. There are loopholes in any system. In paper money, it's counterfeit, but in paper money, it's also like what the government did in Venezuela, where they overinflated the currency, which was a mistake on their part, but it was also kind of to cover their own mistakes, because they did that when the oil prices started to decrease. Venezuela is very reliant on oil as an industry, and when their GDP started to drop, all that jazz, it got them worried, and so they tried to inflate the currency to try to combat a less amount of money coming into the country. And they did that to a point where, because not only were they devaluing their currency, their GDP was decreasing, so it's like an exponential decrease no matter which way you're trying to do it. The value of your currency is going down. And when that started to happen, they put in an entire new exchange rate for only government officials, and it was completely stable, and it was 10 bolivars to $1. And you can see that is a completely corrupt system, while the rest of the people have to deal with a 50,000 to $1 exchange rate. So I think maybe not counterfeit is the thing with cryptocurrency, but the idea of a decentralized currency can easily persuade people. And because of that persuasion, it could be really easy for people to dominate the system by doing a majority of the mining, or banding together on the internet to swing the pendulum either way for the value. I'd watched so many videos, but still never studied Bitcoins until I watched your video. Hannah, wow, thank you. I really appreciate that. I would also actually really like to get your opinion on the video in general, because patrons know this, but it took me a long time to figure out how to properly talk about this really complicated topic and also tie it into something else very complicated. In total, it was around 60 hours of work, which is just ridiculous. And it's something we're going to talk about in the patrons only stream, is about how to optimize that process and make it sustainable. So if you want to join in on that conversation, patreon.com/curiository. Okay, so that was some of Faith's inclinations for cryptocurrencies. But I would like to know from some other people. Wow, we have 14 people watching. Where are all of you? This is a conversation. Imagine that we're all in a room and we're talking about this stuff, but I'm the only person you can hear. That's what I want this to be. So, can you explain the different types of cryptocurrencies? All right, Arthur. That's a great question, because you might have heard stuff about Bitcoin, but you might have also heard about Ethereum or Dogecoin or whatever. And all of those are lumped into cryptocurrencies, because they use that same process that we talked about in the video, where you have the public ledger and you have miners that work on keeping the system decentralized by doing really complicated encryption algorithms. So what happens where like there are multiple cryptocurrencies is because it's open source, anybody can run that same program. That's a little weird way to explain it, but so Bitcoin runs on a bunch of different servers and they all talk to each other, and that's how Bitcoin operates. That's how it's kept decentralized, is they all work on their own computers and they're just connected over the internet. But I could have a cryptocurrency called Ethereum or Dogecoin that just works on different computers, and because we all talk to each other and we all run the same code and all that jazz over the internet, we can have our own cryptocurrency. So right now, you and I and everybody in this chat could go to the GitHub repository, which is just a place where people post code, and we could run the blockchain technology, which is what all cryptocurrencies work off of. It's the process we talked in the video, and by implementing that and calling it something different, we have our own cryptocurrency. So yeah, that's the different types of cryptocurrencies. And Garlicoin. That's it. But that's how different types of cryptocurrencies work, and that's how I'm gonna move the chat down a little bit. That's how they differentiate each other. All right, so let's go with Christina Kim. If you saw a viewer pop in and out, it was me watching your live stream while walking across. My question: when do you think governments will start taking the currency seriously, or will they ever? That's a great question too, because right now there are, I believe, there might be some, but not a lot of governments that really see cryptocurrencies as part of the whole global economy. So that's what we talked about before, where the US believes that the bolivar is a currency that people can use and exchange and all that jazz. The US government does not believe that that any cryptocurrency is valid. And that causes a bunch of problems, because then you can only exchange money and all that jazz through private industry, which, I mean, it isn't all that bad, because it's just you have to have access to the internet. So Bitcoin cryptocurrencies aren't reliant on governments being able to see them as valid, but it does help. It's kind of a trust thing, because if I trust the US government, I can trust the pound, the British pound. And if I trust the US government and the US government trusts Bitcoin, then I can trust Bitcoin. So I don't know if it's very important that governments do see them as valid, but I do think that they will eventually see them as valid as people start to use them, because that's the biggest crux here, right? Is so few people are using Bitcoin to do actual things. So many people are using it as an investment opportunity, but not very many people are using it to actually send money around, other than criminals, which is something I didn't talk about in the video. But criminals love cryptocurrencies because they're completely anonymous. There's no government control, so the government can't track their exchange, and it's all done over the internet, which already gives you a level of anonymity. Right. So back to your main question. Well, do I think they'll ever take it seriously? Yes, if enough people start to adopt it, but I don't think it's a priority for either party. Okay, Judy Rudek. Yes, I love that people are talking to each other. I don't have ever overtly condone cryptocurrency, because that would represent a loss of control of government. That's a very interesting question too, is since cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, are branded as be decentralized, be outside of government control, let's build something together. If the US government ever said, oh yeah, that seems like a good idea, that'd be a little weird. So that is a great point. Okay. Wow, that was a solid discussion. And we're 20 minutes in. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question. What are your thoughts on the Venezuelan inflation crisis? Sorry, I just have a list of questions I wanted to ask people. And mainly with the Venezuelan inflation crisis and kind of their extreme poverty that's going on right now. Did you know about it before? Did you know what caused it? And do you want any more context that I didn't provide in the video to help you understand it? I'd love to know all of that. And while you all are typing, because again, it's faster for me to talk than it is for you to type. So I actually heard about this issue on a Vox video that was extremely well done. Vox Media, if you ever watch this live stream as it's recorded on my channel, I love you guys. Just, you do great work, and a majority of why I learned After Effects is to try to do some of the stuff that you do on your channel. So keep doing what you're doing. But that Vox video is just a fantastic overview on the historical context for corruption in Venezuela with Hugo Chavez and all that jazz, and how it translates to what's going on today with the inflation crisis and the corruption that has kind of caused and, you know, manifested itself in that. So yeah, I'd love to know more. Can you touch on the criminal use of crypto you mentioned a few minutes ago? Okay, so we'll backtrack a little bit while people are typing. So cryptocurrencies, criminals like cryptocurrencies because the cryptocurrencies are inherently anonymous, basically, because when you sign up to have a Bitcoin wallet, you don't need to put any information, I think, other than your email, which I guess could maybe be tracked back to you. That's a little different in some cases. This gets into a little bit of weird technical detail, but to get a Bitcoin wallet, someone needs to dedicate a chunk of server data to say, okay, this Bitcoin wallet now exists, and send information about that Bitcoin wallet to this person who's like logged in somewhere. And so because someone has to pay to have a block of information, a server, a computer, to keep track of your Bitcoin wallet on the Bitcoin server, different people have different requirements for who can sign up for a wallet and who can get a wallet address. So I actually went through this process just to see what it was like, and I went with a very reputable company because I wasn't going to go to someone who's just going to steal my information. But that reputable company actually asked me to take a picture of my driver's license so that they can verify, I guess, some details of information about me and about how maybe I would use the currency, because a lot of criminals. So this is also bad for branding, right? So the reason they ask me that and the reason they do a background check on me before I can have a Bitcoin wallet is Bitcoin does not want people to see its currency, or want you to see its currency as a tool for criminals, where criminals can use it to have complete anonymity and it's all over the internet and it's a good exchange because the government can't track them. So they don't want you to see it like that. And so companies that are for Bitcoin and want people to adopt Bitcoin, they are trying to do background checks and make sure that people using Bitcoin are doing it for the right reasons. And that also goes back to big conglomerates investing a lot of money and then divesting a lot of money to swing the value of Bitcoin either way so they can capitalize on that change and profit and make money. Okay, so that's a touch on the criminal use of cryptocurrencies. If you have any other specific questions, I know that was a little back and forth in my brain because I'm trying to not go into so much of, like, there's a lot of weird details with cryptocurrencies that aren't exactly necessary, but they help. Sometimes they just make you really confused. Which is why a lot of the videos currently on the internet are so technical. It's because it's really hard to understand the whole picture if you don't have all the details, but it's also really hard to understand the details if you don't have the whole picture. It's a weird problem to solve. Okay, so no one has opinions on the Venezuelan inflation crisis, and that's okay. It's a kind of, I mean, it's not an obscure topic, but I can understand if you didn't know about it before, or you just don't have enough information to form an opinion, or whatever. That's totally fine. So we can just move on to the next question if everyone's okay with that. Or if you want to ask more questions to me, if there's some other stuff that you don't understand, you can leave that in the chat too. There's only 14 of us, so it's not like it's going to get overwhelming. Okay, so let's see. Maybe I don't want to do that one yet. Now, okay, let's jump into it. Because that's why we're here, right? We're here to voice our opinions, learn from each other, no matter what our opinion is, whether, no matter how it'll be perceived by others. We just want to learn from each other and learn from each other's past experience and all that jazz. So, with that in mind, what are your thoughts on gun control? This is a hot button issue, and I like that we're talking about it, but I'm a little worried that we're going to talk about it. Decomposed. Gosh, I'm not supposed to do that. What are your thoughts on gun control? I think it's a very important issue that we're talking about, and there are a lot of components to try to understand, and I hope I did justice, as someone who is not very pro-gun or pro-Second Amendment, to the people who are, because it does come down to trust and who you trust, and for people like me, it also comes down to who you can trust to have a gun. So I'll answer this question really quick while you guys are typing about. Remember to type now about gun control, although I appreciate all of the cryptocurrency questions. So Decompose says, my understanding is that the vast bulk of Bitcoin usage deals with not buying things, but transferring money anonymously outside of the country. That doesn't make the person a criminal. That is true. Totally agree. I don't want to make it seem like transferring money outside of the country or whatever is a criminal act, but there are a lot of cases. So online drug sales for things like marijuana, heroin, LSD, all that stuff, those transactions are usually done in Bitcoin because it is very difficult for the U.S. government to track those transactions, and it's easy for the criminal party to just exchange the money from Bitcoin into another currency, or to just use it as a container to hold their money. So that's what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to people that are just wiring money to people outside the country or whatever. I'm referring mostly to the people that are using it to buy drugs, or in some cases to buy people, which is absolutely horrendous. So that's what I mean decompose. I don't mean just the people wiring money outside the country. Yes, Miss Rudek. I'm really glad that you joined this conversation, Ms. Rudek. So as you know, I'm an NRA instructor. I know guns. I understand them. A lot of people who express their opinions about guns being bad really do not understand them, or worse, only know what the media/movies have told them. That is such an excellent point. And so that's something I actually want to go off of with a little bit of just, I want to be kind of like a professor. Like professors at UVA always talk about not using the podium to influence politics. And so I want to try to do that because I am the only person with the microphone, but I do want to just give a little context about my background. So as we have this conversation, you all know where I'm coming from. So again, I have the hipster glasses. I am quite a liberal person. And what goes along with where I grew up is I have actually never shot a gun. I do not know anything about the safety or training people have to go through. What I do know is some of the laws for me, a person like me, to acquire a gun. And I believe that everybody should have the right, if they want to take up things like hunting or need wilderness protection or whatever. I understand that I know nothing about what those people deal with, and if those people need a gun to protect themselves, totally on board. What I'm not super on board with is how easy, or from my perception, how easy it is to buy guns like the AR-15 that I showed in the video, because those are, to me, those are not meant for recreational or for personal protection. To me, those are made for killing. And because of that, I feel like there should be a lot more restriction on who can access them. So more training for people to go through before they can get the gun. I'm all for background checks. I'm all for making sure that no one who shouldn't have a gun should have a gun. Right. Okay, so that's just a little bit about my background. So let's go see. As an engineer, I think gun control can be solved with technology. Arthur. Just need more public interest in developing these solutions. That is actually a really, really, really great point. So I don't know if anyone has read the book Ready Player One. The movie just came out, but I saw the movie and I recommend that you read the book because the movie wasn't all up to my expectations. And in the book Ready Player One, the main character buys a gun for personal protection because bad people are after them. No spoilers, but when he buys this gun, it has to be biometrically authenticated to him. So the only person that can pull the trigger is him. And I think that that's a really interesting just like point of discussion, because that means the programming for that gun, for that weapon. If anybody's seen the movie Dead Poet Society, this is the thing I always go back to when I think about guns and violence, and especially like how guns can be used for suicide, is because in that movie, oh god, I shouldn't spoil that, never mind. Okay, but I think it's very interesting, Arthur, you're right, to have some sort of technology that could like biometrically authenticate you as the person that has been trained to use this weapon or anything like that. I think that's super awesome. Okay, so let's see what Miss Rudek, is our resident NRA instructor, would say. Having never shot one, you would not understand that. Totally agree. Somewhere I have a picture with 2 rifles. I think which is more dangerous. What is a standard Woodpeck simple looking rifle? All the plastic rounds and whistles. AR-15 platform. Okay, so everyone can read in the chat, but I'll just read it out loud so that I can read it again. So she says, to me, having never shot a gun, I would not understand what something like an AR-15, right, would be used for. And plastic bells, the guns are actually the same gun with different features. Okay. So it does, I totally agree that it comes down to my perception. Like, I do not understand gun technology. I don't understand the safety and all that jazz. Okay, I also have no problem with ensuring that no one who presents a danger to themselves or being bribed for having a firearm. Yes, I think that's the common ground that we all gather. Sorry, I read that to myself, but just like murmured it out loud. She says in the chat that she, as an NRA instructor, is someone who knows guns really well, who I so appreciate you being here, because it would have just been a big echo chamber for all of us, I think, if we didn't have somebody with your background. So, she also says she has no problem with ensuring that no one who presents a danger to themselves or others should be barred from having a firearm, which I think is the common ground that we are currently gathering ourselves around, as it's being like talked about for real in like Washington D.C. and in the House and Senate, because we all know that there are kind of crazy people, and that I don't mean crazy like they're, just the worst of the worst or evil or whatever, but things happen. We all know that we go through mental cycles as people, just like everybody else. And when that happens to some people, they get very violent. And currently it's kind of easier for people to get guns in America than it is to get guns outside of the US. I think that's true. Let me know if that's not true. Yeah, so I think that's the common ground we can all find, is how we... it's good to understand where your own knowledge is lacking. Yes, it is good to understand where your own knowledge is lacking. And so I think that's a great place that we can all gather around, is we should just make it harder for people that should not get a gun to get a gun. But I think the problem with that, and with finding common ground on that solution, is some people see it also as making it harder for all people to get a gun, which it probably would be, because everyone would have to go through the same background checks, the same training procedures, all that jazz. And so that presents a weird issue for people, I think, where you're taking away my ability because of bad people, but I'm not a bad person, right? It's like when you were at the lunch table and other people were throwing food, but you didn't throw food, but you also got detention. That really happened to me. Okay, so let's hear from some more people. So Hannah Smith, she said, I'm from Japan. Wow, international, super fun. I'm from Japan. Thank you for being here. What time is it there? I am from Japan, and the gun regulations are really great. Or looking at places like Australia, it seems like there are so many things the U.S. can do by learning from other countries. I totally agree. Is there something about the U.S. society geography that stops them from following suit? Yes. I don't mean to say that we were the only country to have an oppressive government before our revolution or anything like that. But when our founding fathers, the people that created things like our Constitution, our like the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, all that jazz, they wanted to make a system that would not only prevent some of the things that they experienced, some things they thought were oppressive and corrupt, but also the idea that the U.S. could become one of those places. So not only the foresight to try to fix the problems they had at hand, but also kind of a strange pseudo third party to think that the government they created could one day be like the government that they tried to get rid of. And because of that background, because of that context, our society, our culture is kind of built on an independence, a reliance kind of away from government in a way. And because of that, we sometimes feel a distrust of the government that I think other countries might not feel. Again, I'm a white male born in the US, so my background is not great on knowing how other people feel in other countries. But I think that that's one of the biggest causes. That's a great question. What was your name again? Hannah Smith. Thank you so much, Hannah Smith, for being here, even though you're from so far away. Okay, so Miss Rudek is putting a lot of stuff in the chat, so let's try to see what she said. It's good that you understand. Okay, no, it's just the next two. I would also like to point out that the tragedies that have occurred in recent times involved the breaking of many laws. That's true. For example, at Sandy Hook, the shooter broke 6 laws before shedding a child's blood. If you can go to 7 with some, I'm all for it. That's a very interesting point. I believe it's Washington State, where it actually is a felony to hand your rifle to a friend so you can tie your shoe, because that constitutes a transfer under law. That's a really interesting point. So once a gun is in possession of someone, how do you not only transfer ownership, but transfer the ability to use or even hold the rifle or gun to any other person, which I think is another great thing that follows with what Arthur was saying, where you could use some sort of technology to develop solutions to prevent people who aren't supposed to use the gun from using it. Okay, so Decomposed writes, the purpose of the Second Amendment is not to defend ourselves or hunt, but to resist tyranny. Yes, exactly. Government is what citizens need to be wary of. It is the last thing we should trust to regulate. It is the last thing we should trust to regulate them. Yes, so that is the embodiment of why it is so hard to talk or find solutions for gun control in the U.S. And why, to Hannah, your point, why the U.S. can't follow suit with other countries who already have much greater gun control laws and regulation of weapons than we do. That 2 sentences or whatever is the exact embodiment of it. People believe that the government is the regulatory body that we should not allow to control guns, because the government are the people that we maybe should try to overthrow with guns. Just like they did for the Revolutionary War, where they tried to, I think some places, they're like the armaments, they tried to gain access to the armaments, break in, take the guns, and try to attack the British. So that is why it's so difficult to talk about this. And that's why, so Decomposed, I think you are totally right that that's the purpose of the Second Amendment. We will never know, but I think you're right that is. Where I think we disagree is that the way, like, should we be wary of that? right? Because in my mind, again, no, literally nothing about guns other than that they scare me. And so, by believing that we could ever, I can't believe that we could ever go up against the U.S. government. No matter how many people we had, no matter the firepower, the U.S. government has so many resources. We spend more on military armaments than I think any other country, and if anything, we're way up in the top. And so with all that power, with things that we can't have, right, like a tank or nukes or all that stuff, there is very little I think we could do as a new wave of revolutionaries, if that ever comes, to affect that change. And I think that's the big weird disconnect between what I believe and what you believe. And I'm not saying either of us are right. I think that's why it's so weird to talk about this, is I can't see, I mean, I can understand that view, but I can't see it from that view. And because we disagree on that kind of inherent thing of would we ever be able to overthrow the government, I think that difference of opinion makes it really hard to come up with a solution that we can both believe in about gun control. But I think it's a great point, and I really appreciate you being here in the discussion. Oh, why? Well, we would not have to go against the U.S. government. We'd have to be able to intimidate a tyrant. That is a great point, too. If he has to be worried every time he steps, or she, you never know, outdoors, then the Second Amendment has worked. That is very true. So when I was having this discussion a little bit with one of my roommates, who I think is actually in the chat, he did a thing before, but I asked, we both really can't understand that, but because of the No Dumb Questions podcast, which I really invite you to listen to, because if you're not a gun enthusiast or a pro-gun person, it really brings you into the mindset of what someone that believes that stuff looks like, because it's an hour-long conversation and they're both kind of on the same page. And so a lot of what they talk about is that point, like a tyrant could rise and we would have to overthrow the tyrant. And to explain that to my roommate, who I was talking to about the issue, I expressed an idea that the people of Germany did, hindsight is 2020, but I bet in the moment did not know that Hitler would cause such destruction and have so much influence. And because people didn't know, and people kind of followed him anyway, just because they were in such poor economic situations after World War I believe. Right? Yeah. And because of those poor economic situations, you're looking for any solution, right? Like, you're in poverty, you can't feed yourself. And so if somebody comes up to you and says, I can solve your problems, you get behind that person, disrupt the government, do what you have to do. And I don't think people knew, I don't want to believe that people knew the destruction you would cause, because no matter where you are in the world, I believe people are inherently good. And I think if someone knew before they voted or before he was put in power the awful things that would happen, I don't think that it would be the same outcome. And so the idea of overthrowing a tyrant, I especially in America, that would be really, really difficult, I feel like, especially because you have to be put in power, and then once you're in power, you have kind of dominant control. And so I still don't know if we'd be able to have a foresight to, strike before it happens or whatever, because it's really hard to judge. I think I missed Faith's question, but Decompose, I really appreciate it. Do you think the U.S. could get to that point of corruption? How do you define corruption? Do you think other countries are not also afraid of government corruption? Great question. What's better, communism or anarchy? Wow, so many questions. In your video, Drew, you say towards the end something along the lines of, bottom line, everyone just wants to be safe. So it's funny that you say that, because I know a few people who value freedom over safety. That's very interesting. I would like to talk to those people. You should tell them to join the chat. Okay, so I think I've asked all my questions, but so we can just keep talking. Yeah, but we have like 15 more minutes. So to face point, do I think that the U.S. could ever get to that point of corruption? This is a point of contention in my brain that I've not yet come to a conclusion on, because from one point of view, we have a lot of checks and balances. We have three seemingly independent branches of government. We have a lot of people that have say, right? And no person really has central power. That's the kind of whole idea of the U.S. government. And so, do I feel like we could ever get to a point of corruption? Maybe, but I think it would not be one person, right? I think it would be, and if you're talking about in terms of currency, where the Venezuelan government overinflated, and then we're using it to basically profit by having it be so devalued, and then giving themselves a unique exchange rate. Again, that stemmed from one kind of individual and a kind of political party. So I think that maybe that could happen to us in the US if a political party could gain so much control of every section of government, which is a little bit of the situation that we've been in a back and forth for 100 years, because we have a two-party system. I think a lot of things would change if we didn't have a two-party system. I think a lot of people believe that, and it's just so weird that we have one. But that's a topic for another day. How do you define corruption? So I talked about this a little bit in the last live stream, where we did a little bit of behind the scenes and kind of testing this format. But I think I define corruption when the government starts to do things for the government instead of the people. And that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, with a lot of different opinions on what benefits the government. And I think it's a very nuanced issue on what corruption becomes, but I think we know it when we really, really see it. But some people see it a lot. So what's better, communism or anarchy? I don't know if I can answer that question, because on the one hand, communism is very equality based, but on the other hand, anarchy is very freedom based. And I think that neither in their extremes are great, but I also don't think that either one of them is bad or good. I don't know if the government can get that corrupt, but I don't want to leave myself completely defenseless in case they do. Mr. Right, that's a great... that's a fun saying. Okay. So Cathan Connolly, as someone in the UK people, all right, very cool. We have so many international people joining the chat. I love it. How can I help or do anything about gun control in the US? Wow, Cathan, you're such a nice person to think that, our problems are important enough for you to care, even though you're not, you're not in the location to experience them. That's something that I think a lot of people should have, and it would fix a lot of our global problems if we all felt like everyone was kind of our neighbor. So how can you do anything or help with gun control? Cathan, I don't even know how I can do anything and help with gun control. And so I decided to just make a video about it. And now we're having a live stream to discuss it. So I don't know. You'd have to ask somebody much smarter than me. But I think joining in on discussions, giving us your perspective from the UK and where your gun laws are and how you feel you're protected, or how you feel they're implemented, I think you're doing the most, and I really appreciate you being here, and I think you're a subscriber because I think you've commented in the videos, so thank you so much. Bottom light, everyone, it's funny. Oh, right, so this was the people value freedom over safety. That is weird to me. I mean, actually, that goes right back to communism versus anarchy, right? Some people want to feel free over being safe, which is kind of the same thing. Although not to say that people in a communistic society are ever, are completely safe, but I think you're asking great questions, Faith. You should start a YouTube channel, because that was some great perspective. Okay, so if you ever want to learn more about guns, Drew, reach out. Actually, Mr. Rudek, I might take you up on that, because one of my things on my 25 things I want to do before my 25 is shoot a gun, so I can have a deep perspective and technical knowledge on stuff I don't know. So, yeah, that might happen. um, Great point, Faith. Yes, decomposed. I love that people are talking to each other. In the 1970s, a poll showed that the number one thing Soviet citizens wanted from the government was safety. The number one thing was freedom. Oh, ooh, I would like to see that poll. I don't know if you can put links in the chat, but if you can find that on Google or whatever, I would really, really, really. I think that's just an awesome point of information. Maggie Melton, rapid check of Java. What do you know about the dark web? I don't know anything, but it fascinates me to no end. So, Maggie, the dark web, I will talk about it a little bit just because it's kind of connected to cryptocurrency. So, the dark web is a selection of servers on the internet. Let's backtrack. When you access websites, there's like a server. There's a physical computer that is serving you. That's why it's called the server, serving you the information from that computer. And so that's how you access Facebook. Facebook has huge networks of computers that store all of user data, everything, every post, every picture, all that jazz. And when you access a post or whatever on Facebook, it's sending you that piece of data and presenting it to your computer. And so there's a section of the internet that is the regular web that we know that you can access from Google and all that jazz, which is a connection of servers that we have all deemed to be the World Wide Web, www. And then there's a selection of servers that's known as the dark web, which I can't remember what the thing, the www whatever is, but you access it. You're accessing a separate network of servers that the people over here do not deem as like the World Wide Web, the internet, but it's something different called the dark web, or it's kind of termed the dark web. It's not actually called that. And you can download a browser just like Google Chrome or Safari or whatever you're using, Internet Explorer. You can download a browser that specifically looks at those servers on the dark web, and you can access information, and you can buy drugs, and you can buy lots of awful things. Yes. But that's the dark web. And so the reason that's connected to cryptocurrencies is when people do transactions on the dark web, they do them in cryptocurrencies because it's not traceable, it's over the internet, all that jazz. Good question. Hannah Smith, I just moved to the US to start school at NYU. Congratulations. Your sister goes to UVA. Oh my gosh. I've never experienced any sort of drills and feel unprepared when and if something happens. So this is also a very interesting point, is how prepared people are for something to happen that has to do with violence or guns or anything like that, which is a lot of what people are talking about in what to do in these situations. Because although I believe I went to school in Virginia, and in Virginia we had lockdown drills. So if anybody had entered the school with a weapon or there was a threat of any kind, we practiced what we would do. And it's basically you just turn off all the lights, lock your door, and hide. And sometimes people are just joking about it, and sometimes it makes you kind of feel scared because you know that could happen. And so it's very interesting because you didn't grow up in an elementary school or middle school or high school environment in the US, and so you've probably never experienced one of those drills. I don't know if something in Japan is similar, but at a school like NYU, especially probably maybe hearing about 9/11 or anything like that, it's interesting that you feel unprepared and therefore a little uneasy, maybe unsafe, that you might not be prepared for a situation like that. That's a great perspective. Okay, so this has been fantastic, like super awesome. Just infinitely better than I even in my wildest dreams could have imagined, because we had so many people from so many different perspectives with only 11 people watching. And that's thanks to every single one of you. So I really appreciate you being part of this live stream. And as a closing question, a good conversation. Agreed, Miss Rudek. So as a closing statement for this live stream, I think we have all proven here that it's a very nuanced issue. We all have a lot of different opinions, but I think the big takeaway is that we all did talk about it, right? Even though we two dogs were too many. One could have filled the whole hour. I agree, Decompose. So even though we all have different opinions, we come from different backgrounds, it actually helps our conversation because we get to learn from each other in an open environment where it's not about yelling at each other. It's about listening and trying to understand. Awesome. Thank you so much to all of you. So if you have any closing statements, closing questions, anything, please leave them in the chat. We still have about 6 minutes before we move over to the patrons only stream, which you can access at patreon.com/curiosstory if you would like. Yeah, and if you even just want to put in the chat, I'd like to know how you found the channel, and why, kind of why you're here. I know that that's a weird thing for me to ask you because I want you to be here. I want you to be part of this conversation. I want to grow this community and for this to be a thing that I get to do with people. And I would like to know what caused you to be here. I know a lot of you are my friends from school. A lot of you, like Miss Rudek, I know. But Kathan, Decomposed, Hannah, what caused you to be here? I think maybe some of you found out about Curiosity through the Project for Awesome, but blah, blah, blah. Given that one of $2 was country code, I thought it was it. Yes, that's true. And I appreciate that. Yeah, so Kathan, Decomposed, all of our international people, anybody that you have never actually seen me in person, I'd like to know where you came from, because I really appreciate you being here, and to me, it's a little weird, the amount of trust and the amount of time that I think you've given to me without really knowing me at all. And so I would just like to know. But other than that, we're gonna close out this stream a little bit. Those are all my closing conversations. I love learning, and you are the smartest man I have ever met, and know literally everything. That's not true, Maggie, and I hope I don't come across as that. I really appreciate. I should take the compliment. I have to learn to take the compliment if people give me a compliment. But I appreciate you saying that, but I do not want people to believe that, because the reason I started this channel is because I like to learn stuff. And I wanted to express that joy that comes from learning something new and to understand a complex issue, or just to understand that something that someone thinks is simple is complex. And I wanted to give that to people like you, because I don't know everything, but I want to learn more. And that's the thing I want to express. I don't want anyone to ever feel that I know everything, or that I have answers for all the questions, because I think it's actually important that we sometimes know that it's fun to not know the answer and to be learning and always trying to understand each other. Arthur says, my brother has investments in crypto, and listening to news companies both left and right about gun control pisses me off. My brother. Okay, cool. And then I had to walk the earth. Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate yours too, and I appreciate you being here. Faith says, I believe in the future of this channel and think you are capable of accomplishing great things, culture change, even with Curiosity. Thank you, Faith. I really appreciate that. Faith is one of our patrons on Patreon. She was one of the first patrons to join. And I just love that you're so into this and have been so supportive. So thank you so much, Faith. So Hannah says, found your channel through the Project for Awesome, called it. I've been watching your videos since then, and I want to be here to support. I so appreciate that. I really appreciate the gross, great videos. Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate that. I love the Project for Awesome community. If you don't know about the Project for Awesome, I have a video with like P4A in the thumbnail, which explains kind of what it is. It's like an annual charity event for YouTube. Yeah, and I think that's just amazing that has brought us together. I don't know about you if you found it through the Vlogbrothers or some other channel, but I've been part of kind of YouTube communities since I was in the 3rd grade, and this is the first time I've ever actually tried to reach out to people in those communities and try to grow something bigger for all of us. So I really appreciate that. Okay, so All right, so we have 1 minute left. I really appreciate everybody being here. I know I've said that 1,000 times, but it has been such a great conversation to have with you. If you're watching this, I should have said something about this at the beginning before we did an entire hour, but if you're watching this as a replay, thank you also for being here. Leave a comment with any of the questions, your opinions, anything at all, because I know this time isn't great for a lot of people, and if you watch it as a replay, I really want to know your opinions too, and I want you to be part of this conversation and this community and be part of this thing we're trying to build. So thank you all for being here. I have really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time. But Patreon supporters, please go to patreon.com/curiository and look at the post there. It's going to have the link in like a couple minutes because I have to set it up. It's going to have the link to the patrons only half, where we're going to talk new video ideas. We're going to talk growth strategy. We're going to talk community building. And I want to talk to a lot of you about like what perks you want to see, what access you want to have, and what your thoughts are on how we could grow this channel. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Wherever you are in the world, I hope the rest of your day goes well. Thank you for being here, and I will see you next time.